Battlefield back? Thanks to an earning presentation and an interview with Vince Zampella, we got confirmation on the next Battlefield game. And as a Battlefield fan, I have to say I'm a little bit excited. But it wasn't just the confirmation, we got a pretty incredible amount of information that gives us a look on the next game in the series. So if you're a Battlefield fan, you're going to want to sit down as we go through and discuss the news and speculate about all things Battlefield. Firstly, let's outline some of the key points that we learned and then dive a little bit deeper into each of them. A really good summarization piece from Akami over on Twitter, and also some additional points I picked up from the Insider Gaming article reads, we have a back to basics approach, 64 player maps, no specialists, traditional classes are back. Vince Zampella said we have to get back to the core of what Battlefield is and do that amazingly well. The game has entered full production earlier this year with a community program planned for 2025. The extra additional points that I've added are a modern day setting, a campaign that's set between 2027 and 2030, a battle royale experience potentially, 10 multiplayer maps at launch, 45 weapons, destruction akin to Rainbow Six Siege. Game has already been playtesting almost daily, and Battlefield CTE, or like a closed test, like a server that you go on to basically test patches and stuff, has also been planned as well. With all of that laid out, I wanted to pick out some of these key points and discuss them at a deeper level, because it's just easy to read all this and go, yeah, cool, next Battlefield. But I think it's important to go through each of them and look at them a little bit more in depth. Before we do that though, hit the subscribe button if you like Battlefield games. We hear the term back to basics a lot when it comes to any old franchise that has lost its way in more recent times, and I can think of this with Call of Duty more recently when they did the whole boots on the ground a few years ago. RPGs do this when they've kind of lost their way, and core franchises are trying to get back what they lost when they tried to evolve. But what does it mean in context? I think this quote from Vince in an article from IGN kind of summarizes it. I mean, if you look back to the peak or of the pinnacle of Battlefield, it's that Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4 era where everything was modern. And I think we have to get back to the core of what Battlefield is and do that amazingly well. And then we'll see where it goes from there. But I think for me, its peak of Battlefieldness is in the Battlefield 3 and 4 days. So I think it's nostalgic for players, for me, for the teams even. Those are the heyday. Although I would say 1942 also. I 100% agree with what Vince is saying here. Battlefield 3 and 4 are regarded as some of the best games in the franchise's history, and hearing this gives me a lot of confidence in the direction of the next game and what the team is focusing on. Having a modern setting is always great, especially for me. I could sit here and discuss 2042 or the more historical settings in terms of how good they are, but I think it also has a multitude of issues, Battlefield 2042, that took years to iron out, and I don't think the setting was that much of a problem. I think many fans will be happy to hear that back to basics approach is going to be cemented, thanks to Vince stating that specialists are going away in favor of the traditional classes. This was further backed up in the article saying, so I wasn't there for 2042. I don't know what the rationale was, but for me, it's like the team tried something new. You have to applaud the effort. Not everybody liked it, but you've got to try things, and it didn't work. It didn't fit. Specialists will not be coming back, so classes are kind of at the core of Battlefield, and we're going back to that. Specialists, I think, were one of the core issues of Battlefield 2042. It felt like the game lost a little bit of its identity then. Fulfilling a role in a squad, at least for me, is the reason I play Battlefield, even if that means sitting and spotting as a sniper for majority of maps or taking helicopters out the air as an engineer. Each specialist felt like it was a little bit gimmicky, and once you found the best one that you liked, I remember everybody was using Casper at the start of it just to get super amounts of XP because you could spot everybody, and once you do that, nobody else really gets used, and no one bothered to use any other specialist at the time. It became kind of like the meta to pick one of those things. At least with the move to traditional classes, there are pros and cons to using each of the classes, but it will settle into that squad play. And this is music to my ears at least, and maybe it is to yours as well. The next key part of Battlefield, at least for me, is the maps. And 128 players in 2042 sounded really awesome on paper. Massive scale battles, multiple smaller fights taking place around the map, But what it meant was the maps became too expansive and kind of barren at times, too big for their own good. And that's kind of the main theme that goes through 2042. It was just bigger meant better, and it didn't really amount to that. Oftentimes you would run into certain maps that were smaller in areas, and it became a meat grinder, this war of attrition when you were playing with so many players. And you'd often have a lot of bots as well running around because you couldn't fill the lobbies. Many of the maps in 2042 were redesigned over the last couple of years to fit that 64 versus 64, and the reduction to that player count I think helped it a lot when I revisited the game a few months ago. And it also seems like Vince has a similar opinion when it comes to the higher player count. It seems Vince was also in the same camp here, saying, did it make it more fun? Like, doing the number for the sake of the number doesn't make any sense. We are testing everything around what's the most fun. So like you said, the maps, once you get to a certain scale, become different. It's a different play space, and I think you have to design around that. So we are designing something that is more akin to previous Battlefields. He then went on to also say, I'd rather have nice, dense, really nice, well-designed play spaces. Some of them are really good, and I can't wait for you to see some of them. He is right. 128 players was a novelty that wore off rather quickly. We do know that destruction is coming back in the game, as it always has been, but I think they're going to be doing things a little bit differently this time. Having whole buildings blown off the map, I don't know whether they're going to do that, but they said it's going to be akin to something more Rainbow Six Siege, where different calibers are going to do different damages to the environment. Whether or not it's going to be different to what we saw in Battlefield 2042, I don't know. But I do feel like having some maps that are really destructible and having that one centerpiece in the map is really good for its overall design, and having like a set piece happen there. For example, the rocket area in Orbital, when that took off, it didn't really affect the overall area of the map, but it did open up new locations to go in, like underneath the area to go and check it out, and it didn't like mess up the design of that section. Then you also have the big massive tower that was on Orbital as well, and only people would use like the top or the bottom half, so there's a little bit of a balancing thing there. I do think having those would have some cool moments and generally work for gameplay. It has been confirmed that there will be 10 maps at launch, which is lower than the previous entries, but if they are of a good quality, then I think many people won't mind, as long as they are planning on adding more maps into the future, which most likely this Battlefield is going to be a live service game, as it has been the previous two. And they're probably already designing maps that they're going to put in the content plan at some point, because that's just how the industry is with these shooters as well. Alongside them doing like a battle royale as well, which I think is going to be worked on by the team that made the Portal. I do hope the Portal is in the game as well, because then having some older maps that you can check out from BF3 and BF4 to kill that time between new maps coming out might be pretty good. But we don't really know. In terms of gameplay, we have a very small piece of gameplay footage, which is in a concept area that was shown off at the presentation. It is in a concept area, and there's not too much to analyze. It was two guys running around with cardboard boxes with a more modern assault rifle and some grenades. It looked pretty cool, but you can't really analyze anything in true detail, because a lot's going to change between now and when we actually see proper gameplay. Maybe they'll surprise us at the Game Awards and release like a gameplay trailer, or like reveal the full game at some point then, which is in like December time, but I don't really know. I was really happy when I read through the other articles around this, and it listed the developers that were working on the game, and it had Criterion and Motive working on the single player portion of the game, which is cool to me, because Motive, they worked on the Dead Space remake. They also worked on Star Wars Battlefront 2's campaign and also Star Wars Squadron. So if they can give me a 6 to 8 hour action-packed campaign with some fun moments, similar to how Battlefield Bad Company did their stuff. I remember the last campaign that we had, I believe, was Battlefield 1, but I think Battlefield 5 had a campaign in it as well. But I did enjoy the World War I moments that were in Battlefield 1. But yeah, give me that 2011, 2013 nostalgia type campaign, like a real cool shooter campaign, not too long, and yeah, get me into the Battlefield mood before I go and jump into multiplayer afterwards. The last details we can discuss around the game are that it might be coming out sooner than expected, because they're currently in full production. They are playtesting it a lot, and they're planning on doing a community drive in the start of 2025. To me, that sounds like they're pushing for like a late 2025 release, like November, October time. But that's just me speculating from what we've seen before. And I know they're also planning a CTE, which is obviously going to have a great deal of help with Battlefield 4. They had this. I think they had it in Battlefield 1 as well, where you would have a test server to go through all of the things that they needed to update before they went onto the live servers. It's a lot of information to take in, but let me be a little bit skeptical for a moment, because I'm not going to lose my shit straight away. How many times have we gotten hyped for a new Battlefield, or a returning franchise in this case, and it falls flat on its face? The last two Battlefields are in a testament to that, because they both have awful launches. It's taken them years to get all the kinks out of them, and then people are really happy with the game like years down the line. Like, yeah, Battlefield's awesome now, but the damage is already done at that point. It's not that I'm not hopeful or excited by this news. I love me some Battlefield, but it's the same as my previous video with Dragon Age. It needs to build on this level of trust that hasn't been there. And hopefully they can do that with this, and hopefully they can launch the game well. Everything we've heard is going in the right direction, but I just hope at least they can get 90% of this right. A bad map or a bad weapon I can deal with. Bugs, poor matchmaking, and the game not being optimized is something that a lot of players, including myself, can't deal with. The minimum we should expect is for this game to work at launch and be good and not be an awful experience. And ideally hope that it's not rushed out the door, because if it's done right, it could be a return to form for the series. But that's just my opinion. Tell me yours about Battlefield. Are you excited for the new game? Are you worried? Are you concerned? I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments section as always. And if you've enjoyed this video, leave a like on it, subscribe to the channel for more content like this. And this has been It's Jimbo, and I'll see you guys next time.